Thanks for having me. My name is Grace Rizza, as you may know, and I am the proud owner of Identity Dental Marketing. After working in a dental practice for a couple years and working with several marketing companies, I noticed a few things I didn't really love about the options that were out there, which inspired me to kind of pave my own path and start my own business at the ripe age of 24. And that was 8 years ago. So now I have a team of 12, and we work with about 200 or so practices all over the country, and there's nothing I love more than growing and developing a business for someone and helping people to achieve their dreams. So thank you so much for having me here.
Hi, my name is Tanya Brown, and I have a practice in Chesapeake, Virginia, and I have been in practice there. I started that practice from scratch in 2001, and so I'm excited about being on this panel this afternoon with all of you and these great colleagues of mine, and so thank you for being here.
I too thank you. I'm Al Osborne from Baltimore, Maryland, as we say. And I'm one of the guys that understands why you still have the smell of crabs on your fingers. We have a very fine practice out here in Towson, Maryland, and I've been at it for 53 years. Was fortunate enough to get involved in this organization from the beginning, so it set me on the right track. And I'm proud of it, proud to be here, and hope we enjoy the afternoon together.
My name is Chris Salerno. I am a general dentist practicing on Long Island, New York, and I'm also the chief editor of Dental Economics. I still do practice dentistry 2 or 3 days a week, and on those days I have a regular bread and butter dentistry practice. I do focus on some areas like implant dentistry. I do a little bit of sleep apnea, and I do accept some PPOs, which I think is a growing area for a lot of dentists. And I think the old mindset was that if you take PPOs, that's somehow a bad thing, and that, you know, I don't think that's the case anymore. You could be a proud fee-for-service dentist, and that's wonderful. You can be a PPO dentist, that's wonderful too. It all depends on your business model. And thank you very much for being here.
It's great. So I'm Alan Schiff. I seem to know everybody here, so thank you for having me. Thank you for APA for asking me to help sponsor this and get this thing going. Currently, we have 265 practices that we represent. Not many CPAs can tell you this, but our next new client will be a dentist. And we won't accept any other clients other than a dentist because that's our model. We currently have 14 employees. And we love sharing our knowledge. I'm currently in 5 dental schools. I've spoken before the ADA, AGD, the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, and the list goes on. And I just love sharing my knowledge. And I'm really, really honored to be here, honored to be asked to host the regional meeting, honored to share whatever knowledge I can contribute.
The future of dentistry, with the advent of corporate dentistry and multi-ownership groups, what are you doing within your marketplace, panelists, to protect your market despite these recent changes in our profession?
So marketing is obviously going to play a huge role in the ability for the private practitioner to compete with the growing corporate presence in the dental profession. Being able to brand yourself with some unique attribute that will help you stand out is the only way, in my opinion, to really have a fighting chance as the climate changes. So if you're sitting here thinking that maybe your marketing is good and your patients are happy, but you know, what can I do? Think about what you really love to do the most. Think about what you're really very good at, and build your brand, build your reputation around that targeted message, because that's going to help you. A lot of corporate right now is saying that they can do everything, right? And if you're looking for an expert in something, you may not want to go to someone who does everything. So use that to your advantage.
Thank you. Tanya?
One of the things that I'm doing is, of course, marketing, and Grace helps me with that, so thank you for that. She is a true expert when it comes to marketing and branding. I'm also investing in my team on in my practice, as well as attending CE courses and investing in my team to attend those. And then I think long-term, being true to the vision of what got me into dentistry in the first place, and helping my clients be true to their vision or find their vision if that's not clear for them.
Excellent. Al?
I'm going to go a little deeper in, I guess, psychology and say, the hardest thing for anybody in this room to do is to think. And I think, personally, until you sit yourself down for a period of time and you say, who am I? Who do I want to become? And why? Until you can't answer those three questions, you're going to have a problem staying up with what's about to happen in dentistry. But if you understand who you are and why, you have your identity in your mind, you have your barriers, you have your own core values. You'll stay true to them, and whatever cards you're dealt, you'll play them right.
I don't think that corporate dentistry, that DSOs are taking over. You may think of an analogy like when you have a small mom and pop hardware store, and then the big Lowe's or Home Depot moves into town and drives them out of business, right? Or the small mom and pop video store, and then Blockbuster comes in and drives them out of business. I don't think that analogy, although true in those businesses many times, is a fair one for dentistry. I think a more fair analogy for us would be if you have, say, a fine restaurant chain like a TGI Fridays or an Applebee's that puts out a fine product that comes into town. You don't see all of the restaurants go out of business, right? People have interesting tastes for dentistry, some of which we talked about before, and they demand certain levels of service. And there is no one business model that can serve everyone, in my opinion. So you can always distinguish yourself, beginning with your marketing and throughout your entire team effort to present your care to patients. You can always distinguish yourself from the other dentists that are out there, regardless of what business model that they are in.
Was that an excellent response?
Absolutely.
So you had 4 excellent responses. I got troubles now.
It's bad to be
last. It's bad to be last, right? So I take a little bit different spin. I think we forget about our internal marketing. We're always thinking about external marketing, but we fail to remember internal marketing. So what is internal marketing? First is, when is the last time we thanked Smith for referring Williams and Williams for referring Jones? We have ambassadors in our practice, and we don't actually reach out to them to help us promote our practice. So you have A patients, you have B patients, you have C patients. We need to take a look at all of our A patients who truly believe in the philosophies and values that we bring to our practice, that understand the value that we bring, and allow them, using the tools that we give them, to promote our practice and forget about corporate dentistry penetrating the market. So to me, I think we have to get back to the basics and thank Smith, Williams, and Jones.
Absolutely, a fantastic idea. And one of you, I think it was Chris, mentioned that I believe there will never be a place, a city or a town that the patient doesn't want to be treated special. And I think all 5 of them have hit on that. And that is the thing. And target your market. As Tanya Brown said, know who you are and what type of patients you enjoy the most. You'll all take care of all the patients. But target versus the rifle approach versus shotgun. And that's probably a bad word to use this week. Yes, but anyway, using a more rifle approach to attract the ones that you enjoy the most, the type of dentistry, the people that will appreciate you and your dentistry. Any questions at the moment from the audience? Yes. Your name, please. Hey, Pat.
Hi, thank you. Pat Osborne, Towson, Maryland. Chris, I'm just curious. You're the first person I've heard say that corporate dentistry is not going to take over and that we have maybe not as much to fear as what I'm hearing out there. The pattern looks like it is gaining traction. Would you agree? And the trend is upward even on your graph. Do you think it'll hit a certain peak and then it'll level off, or any idea where you think it might be when it levels off?
I'm happy to be a fortune teller here on camera, and in 10 years we can come back and watch the video and see if I was right or not.
forecast?
So here's my forecast on that. I think, and I mentioned this in my comments before, I think that there may be a DSO bubble, and we've already started to see some signs of that. So there's two different types of DSOs. Let me be very clear. There's the very big players, and you can probably name some of those that have 500 or more employees, according to ADA research, how they divvy it up. I think that those folks, barring any scandals or anything like that, will continue to be around. They have healthy practice models. Many of these groups are doing it, I think, the right way. They have great mentorship structures and I won't call it ownership models. It's not, in my opinion, true ownership, but they're giving some equity to some of their dentists to keep them around in the long term. And that's one of the keys to their success, is to keep dentists there. If the dentists are changing over every 3 years, which is not uncommon, then that practice is going to really lose out in the long term and can lose credibility with patients. Then there's the other type of DSO that is more medium-sized. And this is where you see some venture capitalists, you see some private equity groups that are looking to buy up some practices because they hear that dentistry is a good bet. Well, as it turns out, and this is all public information, and on dentaleconomics.com you can certainly find some articles that talk about this, there are practices in the mid-sized group that have actually consolidated. They are having trouble getting financing from the traditional lenders, like PNC and Bank of America and Wells Fargo, that traditionally lend to dentists. They're starting to pull back when dentists start to get to a size of, say, 3 or 5 practices, because that they know those challenges of managing many practices are not the same as owning 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. And the private equity groups in those mid-size, sometimes, not all the time, aren't doing it the way that will best foster mentorship for the younger dentists. So they have sold, they've shuttered their doors. They've even sometimes, unfortunately, ended up on the front page news because of OSHA violations or whatever, Medicaid fraud or whatever it might be. And that's not all DSOs. That's just a few bad apples there. In the mid-sized market, I think we'll continue to see consolidation, and you could call that a bubble that's bursting. DSOs will continue to be a viable option as long as private equity gets a good return on their investment. And as soon as they find that there is something else, podiatry, whatever, veterinary clinics, as soon as they find something else that they think is a less risky and more profitable venture for them, their attention will turn away from dentistry.
Great, thank you.
Dr. Joanne Block-Reef. I'm a general dentist in Owings Mills, Maryland, so not too far from here, and I'm so glad to be here. My question is, let's talk about, let's say we're getting towards retirement age, or who knows when we're going to retire. However, what's going to happen when we want to sell these practices if we don't want to sell our practices to a corporation? It's almost like timing the market. Like, if I practice longer and longer, it's possible my income could go down to be able to sell it to somebody who, let's say, has been out of school a short amount of time, versus selling it earlier, but who's going to pay those big numbers when people have such large debts out there from dental school? I know they can get loans. However, I'm not sure, versus me having to sell to a DSO.
The question is, panelists, when do you know you're ready to retire, and will a young dentist with a lot of debt be able to purchase the practice when it's at its peak for a dentist who's retiring? Is that your question?
Or are we going to have to sell to DSOs, which I know most of us probably don't want to, but we also want a return on our investment. Alan talked about the 3 or 4 investments that we have, and one of those 3 or 4 is our practice. So we don't want that to go like this. So
Excellent question. I'd love for Alan to start off.
Okay, so the good news is I'm starting first, right?
Oh, that's right.
A little bit of piece of disclaimer, though. I'm Joanne's CPA, so I got to be very careful with my response. Joanne has a very nice practice, and you know how I feel about your practice. And we also sell practices, and we have good inventory and we have poor inventory. Joanne's practice would be not good inventory, outstanding inventory. And we have, you with me, Linda? When you have outstanding inventory, you can sell outstanding inventory because there's a buyer out there for that. So come back to your question, when are you ready? You're nearing retirement. Part of that is to meet with your financial advisor and figure out what is the wealth accumulation that you need to maintain your lifestyle, to maintain whatever cost of living or standard of living that you've evolved to. And then how much wealth is that? And then how does the sale of your practice enter into that wealth? Great. So And I have to be careful because I am her CPA, so I'm limited to my confidentiality of information.
At what point are we going to have to worry about, the only alternative we have is to sell to a DSO because they're going to give us more money?
Okay, so Chris put up a slide at the very, to the right of the slide, it was about 80% cottage industry of dentistry and 20% of what we call this DSO, maybe multi-ownership. There will always be the cottage industry of dentistry. It may have shrunk from when we were kids and when we grew up, but there will be 80% in my opinion. If there's 80%, that means there's a buyer out there for everybody's practice in here. And I would like to share with you, I sell practices. I make money selling practices. I get a commission. I will not sell to a DSO, and I'll forego the commission. And there's not many dental brokers that will look you in the eye and tell you that.
Thank you so much. Let's give Alan a nice round of applause. I don't know if the other panelists have anything extra to add, but I think you did a fabulous job answering that.
I'll just be very brief. I think that student debt is not a significant factor for someone to get a loan to buy even a very successful practice. And with a team like a dental CPA and a dental attorney, you can certainly put together some sort of package to transition a new owner into purchasing that practice. You certainly are not going to only have the option to sell to any particular business model like a DSO.
Great. Thank you so much.
You know, I guess I should address this for sure because I'm on the verge of calling it a day. And I guess it's sort of like pornography, you know, when you see it. Some dear friend, Dennis Brave, said to me, when the time comes, you'll know. And I have been holding on for a long time, 53 years. And I know it's time. And I said to myself, I would rather work an extra 6 months or a year and a half to be able to sell my practices. I'm lucky enough to be able to do it to my son. But I would advise anybody, retire as you go, as Bill Blatchford says. Work an extra 6 months, work an extra 12 months. You want to work 2 extra years, throw it away. You don't even need it. It's no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. These are hard to go at the end of this, right? Joanne, great question. I think that the one thing that we haven't gotten very deep on is maybe getting creative with that transition plan, or more creative than the traditional models. And so that might mean selling to 2 practitioners or phasing in over time. There's lots of creative models, and of course Alan's the expert on that, but that's something that I'm looking for in my practice down the road of, you know, transitioning my practice to make sure that the person that comes into the practice has the proper mentoring, and I set them up for success so that then they can take care of those patients and also protect our profession and protect, you know, our practice and help the new owners of the practice.
Thank you. You guys are like, what is this 33-year-old going to tell me about retirement? My advice would be to start looking before you feel like you need to get out, and to just be open to the right person and the right opportunity for when it comes along. I know when I'm hiring employees and things, I have this mantra that I'm always hiring, because if the right person comes around, that I'll make a place for them. And I feel like it's the same kind of thing. You have this legacy, and you don't want to leave it to just anyone. So I think just being open-minded when you start to approach that part of your career, and just making sure that it is the right fit and that you don't feel like you have to find someone right now because you're flexible.
Right. You don't want a fire sale, for a premier practice. And I think there will always be young premier dentists who would love a practice like yours, or like Tanya Brown's, and a lot of the ones in this room. Question?
I can give you a little advice. I just sold my practice 3 months ago, and I've been practicing for 44 years. So my name is Paul Burson. I've been a member of the Academy for the last 10 years or so or longer. And I always wondered when it was going to be time to hang it up. And I came to the conclusion, it's just when you don't want to do it anymore. When you just don't look forward to going in there anymore. You don't feel like, I'm a prosthodontist, you just don't feel like hearing. All of a sudden, everything I heard was nothing but aggravation. I used to be able to deal with the aggravation. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. Couldn't deal with it. I don't think it has to do with money most of the situation. It's just about how you feel when you'll just know. Like
As
Al said, you'll just
Albert
know
said.
when you just don't feel like
You'll
doing
know.
it. And we didn't have any trouble selling. We have a fee-for-service practice. So some of the people that were selling practices say, "Oh, that's great." Some people are saying it's horrible. Okay, no, who can? But you've got to find the right person. Like for instance, there were several and I think a good way to sell a practice is to an existing fee-for-service practice, because I've always been looking for new patients my whole life. As a fee-for-service patient, I never had a wait list of like 3 weeks ahead of time or anything like that. I don't know of anybody that does, except my mentor, Morton Amsterdam, or Walter Cohen. Maybe they did, but other than that, most fee-for-service people don't have this big backlog. So I had several practices in downtown Philadelphia that wanted to buy my practice. I didn't sell it to them because of one factor only. They didn't want my staff. Oh. So I have staff with me 30, 40, 20 years. I couldn't do it to them. They would take maybe the front desk person or maybe the hygienist, but they weren't going to take the whole staff. So also they wanted me to work in their office. I'm used to my own office. I really didn't want to move to another office. I'm left-handed. They'd have to move rooms around. I didn't care about, money's important, but I just didn't care about the money that much to make me do. I wanted to stay in my own office, finish my own career with my own staff. So we had to look and find somebody that would do all that. And
I think you were very ready, Doctor.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'd love to add to that is I've met a lot of dentists, and I'm sure Deborah Englehart Nash has as well, and other consultants Linda Lakin, who hold on to it longer than they should because they're so loyal to their staff. And they know, and we know as consultants, I don't care who you sell to, you're going to have an attrition of about 40% of your team within the first year of selling your practice to whomever. And a lot of dentists I know held on to it to keep their team gainfully employed. And that's not a real good reason to practice beyond the time that you're past wanting to.
I doubt he's going to lose 40% of my staff. I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Hi, Linda.
Hi,
I'm
Linda.
Linda Lakin, and my question is, I'm working with more and more dentists that are participating with a variety of insurance companies. And the question always is, how do we make this work? How can we be profitable? How can we continue to have fun? How can we love what we're doing? And so I'd like to hear what your thoughts are as a response to that.
So the question is, she works with a lot of clients who are accepting a lot of the plans, and she wants to know how they can continue to be happy and profitable. Because as Chris said, it's not a dirty word to be part of the insurance plans. However, you have to pick the ones that are going to be the top, not the bottom of the rung of the ladder. And there are consultants who specialize in that. And so thank you for that question. And we'll call on Dr. Tanya Brown to be first. I don't think you got to be first yet, Tanya.
Well, thank you. Great question. It's a reality that we all face in our own practice or with consulting clients. And so in my experience, the things that I've had my clients look at is, number one, their vision and mission for the practice. Is this sometimes dentists, when they start practices, they think, I'll just sign up for all these plans and get all these patients, and then I'll dump all these plans later. That's not really usually a good idea in that mindset. And so really starting from the beginning of knowing what your mission and vision, and then having those systems in place, because we know the systems work when we work the systems. And I was in a practice, in fact, recently, and talking to a dentist, and they had like $250,000 worth of redos in a year. That kills your profit, no matter if you're participating or not participating. So making sure that those clinical skills are excellent, and the efficiency, and that comes along with the systems. And then also knowing the numbers of the plans that you're participating with, knowing what the terms of those agreements are, and tracking that. And Rick Williford created a great program, Dentometrics, that allows dentists and consultants to easily track those numbers and know how much you're producing from those patients, knowing what those adjustments are, and tracking that and looking at those numbers. So I think that, those pieces of the puzzle, because there's not any one cookie cutter answer for every practice. And so you can actually be very profitable participating, and you can actually be very non-productive by not participating. So there's the gamut. There will be successful practices that participate with PPO plans, and there will be successful practices that are fee-for-service.
Chris?
Yeah, I would say I agree. There's no answer for every single practice. You have to do some soul searching. You have to put your business plan together or create a new one and throw out the old one. Working with the consultant is certainly a great start. Assuming that you have some practice management software, you can do a very simple analysis to see even if you're a fee-for-service practice today, how many of your patients would benefit from having these different plans. And that right then and there doesn't tell you that you should continue to accept it, right? So if you have, say, 50% of your patients are on MetLife and you're currently fee-for-service, when you hit on the MetLife switch, you're going to be taking a hit right day one, right? And it may take a few months before the marketing that comes from, the passive marketing that comes from being on a PPO actually benefits you. So whether you are looking to make a extreme change as a fee-for-service dentist to accepting a few PPOs, or whether you're starting a practice from scratch and accepting that, it has to be part of a bigger plan, and you have to do some great analysis on it.
I want to add one thing. The other part of that, I think, is our mindset. Most dentists get mixed up and we get it in reverse. We think, we need more patients. But in fact, if we would actually do the dentistry on the patients that are already in our practice, we have more dentistry than we could do in 3 lifetimes.
Amen. That's right. Amen.
So true.
A little hard for me to get involved in answering the question because I've gone 53 years in dentistry without ever accepting an insurance or of any kind, PPO or otherwise. And I think it has to do with what you just said, your mindset. If you know who you are, you'll make it work. And if you have to figure 20 ideas like I did every night, creativity, I did that for a year. I know it sounds ridiculous, it sounds exaggerated, but I had to think about my practice and come up with 20 ideas every single night, 7 days a week for 365 days. And I came up with a lot of neat ideas. I'll give you one that I use now. We have a lay advisory board. How many of you have that? You know what it is? Pick your top 15 or 20 patients and take them out to a country club for a brunch and say, now that we've had a few mimosas, how do you feel about our practice?
What can we do differently, right, Alan? Albert?
So, Linda, great question. That could be just like one agenda topic.
Could be a whole seminar.
Isn't it? It's
Yes.
a great topic. So I have a couple responses to that. The first is I agree with what Al and Tanya said. You got to figure out who you are, what you want to be, and how you vision your practice. The next is look at the statistics. 50% of the U.S. population does not have dental insurance. So my question to all of you, what are we doing in a proactive way to market that 50% that does not have dental insurance? And then ultimately we should use resources like Greg Beck that's here to put in a dental fee plan that gives the patient the affordability to afford your services and reach out to him to implement such plan. For those of us that are participating with insurances, Joanne, we've done this with your practice, take a look at the 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 insurance plans you're participating with. And Care First, Blue Cross Blue Shield is the worst. And everybody in this room knows it. At 50% of your UCR, what gets the hairs on the back of my neck up is consultants will tell you, and don't even videotape this, I hate this term, a warm butt in the chair is better than an empty chair. And if you run the numbers, that's not necessarily true. So be careful when consultants tell you that, because you start to gravitate to it because you see an idle chair. And you, quite frankly, you could be losing money on this patient that otherwise you could be catering to a patient that truly gravitates to your services. One last thing, Ben Tanai's not here. That's who I use. It's Veritas Dental Consulting. He negotiates your insurance reimbursements. And where you can and where it's possible, I've had 8, 10, 30% increases on insurance procedures because I have that resource to give to my clients that my clients ultimately benefit from. We need to surround ourselves with good consultants that can bring that level of ability to us that, quite frankly, we don't have. And we need to
Alan,
reach out
can
to
you
that.
repeat his name again
Yeah.
for the audience?
His name is Ben Tanai. It's on the sponsorship form. As I said, he was in Los Angeles today, couldn't be here. His company is Veritas Dental Consulting. And what he does, Linda, and everybody should hear this, he will look at the plans that you're participating with. He knows the market, and he will tell you whether or not he can help you. And he doesn't charge you a fee unless he knows he can help you. What other consultant would do that? Like put all this time and effort into your practice and not charge you a fee if he can't help you. If he can help you, then there's a fee associated with it. For those that are participating with insurance, if there's one takeaway from today's meeting, Ben Tanai.
Great. Al, do you have something to add, Grace? We kind of passed the mic this way, and we left her off.
Alan took 2 of mine, so that's good. One thing to remember is just because you join plans does not mean automatic new patients. I have people that call me and they expected this flood of new patients, and then they come to find out that they only took a hit financially. So because so many people are in network, the patients go online, they look for a provider, and then they compare you to a list of 100 other providers. And so it's not always this thing that you expect it to be. Another thing to keep in mind is there are legal ramifications. So if you're used to marketing freely however you want, and then you join networks and plans, there are some restrictions. You can't offer, and I'm not an attorney, but you can't offer certain discounts or special pricing to people who are not utilizing their insurance benefits. So there's a couple things to consider before you just jump in, and then kind of like what Alan said, be selective, look at the fee schedules, and consider negotiation, because from what I've seen, there's a lot of wiggle room there. So,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you so much. I have a question from the questions that were sent to us, and that is based on what we've talked about thus far, and we'll start with whoever has the mic. Who has the mic? Chris, what do you see truly as the biggest threat in our profession going forward for the next 5 to 10 years?
Apathy. That's it. It's not DSOs, it's not student debt, it's not anything other than apathy. It's not taking the charge to become a more active business owner, and instead just being a passive one. You've heard, not the first person to say, hang up the shingle and patients will just show up. We have to work extremely hard. Whatever our practice model is, fee for service, PPO, whoever our target demographic is, we have to become active business owners. And if we are passive, if we have apathy, that is when your individual practice the failure rate is still less than 1% by many accounts, but there are plenty more that aren't failed, haven't shuttered their doors, but are just overstressed and underpaid.
Hanging on.
Hanging on.
Thank you. We'll start, I guess, with Al and go that way, then we'll come back.
A couple of things I thought about. I think one of them is fear.
Fear.
Everybody's so fearful with what's going on. You know, I've lived a long time, and Stan Block here has been around with me a long time. We go back, and you look in the 40s when fluoride came out, and then the 50s. Everybody's saying dentistry's had it. It's gone. Everybody got into a fear deal, you know? Never happened. You know what happened? Sugar rate consumption went up 700%. So
Al,
we
he's
spend
so
a lot of
funny.
time with fear. And I guess the other thing I get concerned about is the lack of interest politically. I think we as a profession have to step in and start taking a more active role in our politics. And I'm just checking. I had a list of things that maybe I could add a couple. Just a general lack of understanding of yourself and your value to the public. I think that's something that has to come out.
Great feedback.
So,
Excellent. Thank
thank
you
you.
so much, Al.
Wow, it's hard to add on to those great comments. I'll tag on to what both of you guys have said. I think the best practice owners are the ones, or practice managers are the ones that are not asleep at the wheel. And when earlier Grace was giving her presentation, one of my thoughts about you were talking about Joanne and how great she is at marketing. She is definitely awake at the wheel and not asleep at the wheel, and that's being active in her practice and in her business, because it is a business. So.
I think there's only so much room for our attention as consumers, and being able to kind of come together and educate our communities. So if every person in this room took it as their personal obligation to educate their community on what they can provide, it would really further the profession. And so, the biggest really threat is us not stepping up and taking on that obligation. And yes, it is marketing, but it's also just a lot of what Al said, believing in ourselves and what we have to offer. And I'll be quick, but I'll tell a quick story. I've had 2 babies in the last 4 years, and never once did my doctor advise that I have my oral health evaluated. And so the general public is really lacking when we don't step up and we don't own our responsibility as public educators. So we're our biggest threat.
Great. Thank you so much. Alan, we want to hear from you.
Pretty tough to add to those responses. They're
Tough
outstanding.
to be last.
Yeah, I just think that it deals with education as well. And if we're educated and we feel confident about our education, then we can overcome the fear that whatever this fear is that's out there. And if we do things in a proactive way and run our business in a proactive manner, I think you'll get the results. If you run your business in unfortunately, just a reactive manner, you're going to get reactive results. So I think you have to surround yourself with good, competent professionals to ultimately give you the confidence to run your practice in a proactive way and forget about the fear and just protect the marketplace in which you serve.
Well done. Let's look at the audience again.
Good afternoon. My name is Amber Jongha. I'm from Silver Spring, Maryland, and I have a question about team training. It's one of the biggest challenges that we have in our office, where we bring on new team members, and we're so busy seeing patients and responding to patients that we don't have a very robust system for getting people up to speed.
Great.
And so I'd love to know, should we close our office more often? Some doctors don't like to hear that we should close for training. Should we be overstaffed a little bit of the time so that we can bring new people up? I'm just curious to know what you think in terms of...
Let me ask the panel a different way, and that is, we all know how important it is to have the team well trained. And each of these panelists are now thinking about their answer. But I can honestly agree with you that hearing that you have to close a practice, the larger the practice, the more people that you have to take to dental meetings. And yet it breaks my heart because for 20, 40 years, I've watched dentists bring their teams, and they're the ones that, in my opinion, are at the top of the game because team members want to do a great job. They need training. So we're going to start with Grace.
I know it feels like production in a dental practice is different than most other businesses, but just like if I owned a hair salon and I was doing hair, it's the same production, right? And so we think that we have these special circumstances where we can't do certain things, but you can. And one thing that I've learned in just the last couple years is that if I don't necessarily prioritize my schedule, but I schedule my priorities. And so I actually block an hour or two every single Monday morning and have an agenda for my team. And I've taken it to be, and I'm not a dentist, of course, but I take it to be one of my most important investments of my time is in my team, because you're only as strong as your weakest link. And that's one thing that I feel like just needs to be a priority, and it needs to be in your schedule, in my opinion. So.
Thanks so much. That's true.
Absolutely, I agree. That's part of the reason why Linda and I created the Ultimate Team Mastery. It's an online program that's all access anytime, anywhere, because you may have team members that are on different schedules. Of course, we recommend that you're working with the entire team at the same time. Sometimes if it's a new team member, obviously you've got to get them on board, but part of that onboarding process should be a system in your practice. So maybe that's a manual, maybe that's videos. There's lots of resources for that to get them up to speed. And then I do absolutely agree that time spent instead of spent, time invested in your practice, working on your practice, not just in your practice, will pay dividends for many, many years to come. And I think, Linda, you probably said this years ago that, dentists sometimes think, well, how much is it going to cost me to train my team? And so Linda's response was something to the effect of, doctor, isn't it wiser to invest in your team and, have them leave the practice or move or whatever happens in their life than not invest in their training and have them stay? So, yeah. And I think getting creative with being able to do that, because, you have millennials that learn differently than baby boomers, and so making sure that you're tapping into those resources. And that's what people like Grace and me and Linda and, Deborah and all these people do.
I've always felt the team is your finest asset. It's not a liability. And as such, we invest a lot of time in team building and team understanding, because there's a lot of dentistry walking out your door if that team doesn't know how to think when they see it. For instance, your hygienist is in the room and a patient comes in. If they don't know how an implant works to stabilize a lower partial, or mini implants versus standard implants and how they can be used for these things, if they don't understand what a precision attachment is, how do you expect them to encourage these things for your patients for a better way? You can't. And I guess the way we handle it at this point is every month, at least once a month, we have what's called a big picture meeting, and it's dedicated to team understanding and team learning. And we're covering these very things because we now have new hygienists. They're younger, and they don't know. They don't come out of dental school understanding these things we're talking about. For instance, a good handoff at your front office. What is it? How do you do it? We get together every month and go over these things, because you've got to be a well-oiled precision machine if you want this thing to be effective and efficient. That's my way of handling it, and we've always done it for years. Seems to work. And I have to tell you, a lot of it started with Linda coming into our office years ago, putting us on the right kind of footing.
I would say right off the bat, if closing the office for a day or half a day you feel is going to be a good use of your time, then totally do it. Don't trip over dollars to save pennies. As you've just heard, I mean, it's our 27% of our overhead goes towards our team if we're doing it right. It's our biggest expense, our biggest asset, I would say, so it's worth doing. I would say a couple of things. One is I recommend personally every office have three books that are at the front desk. Your office policy manual that talks about hiring and firing and vacations and all of that, so you're all on the same page. A list of job descriptions that will help you with training new employees and keeping people accountable for who does what. And the third is a book of your systems that tells you how you do what it is that you do. And that's published there. It's a mutable document. You can change it, and it evolves with your practice as you need to. It helps keep everyone accountable for your team. And it's something you can point to in your morning huddles or your training sessions. But take the time. I'll end with just saying I think it's good fun to go out for a dinner every now and then with your team too. I like to use it, go to a nice restaurant and show what great service you get in that restaurant and use those as cues for learning experiences for your team. And as we learned from Alan, that's 100% write-off on your business, so that's not so bad.
Thank you, Chris.
Wow, Chris, look how you tied that in. That was pretty cool. Amber, great question. Excellent question. The number one asset in the practice to me is not operatories 1, 2, 3, or 4, the autoclave or digital radiography. It's your team. And we fail to invest in our team. What Al didn't share with you, he has a nuts and bolts meeting every Tuesday, I think. He He has this big picture meeting once a month, and guess what else he has? An annual retreat. How many practices take the time to do an annual retreat? Al, how long does it take you to prepare for an annual retreat? Good while. Could may take 6 months to a year.
Started on it last April, and we're having it next week.
Yeah, so it takes time. So we have to invest in our team. And if you think about it, when I was telling you about, when I was sharing with you my vision of a profitable practice, and we talk about case acceptance and presenting cases, and ultimately getting to have the patient say yes, our team must believe in our philosophies and values. If our team doesn't know who we are, how can they potentially present cases that ultimately we get a yes? So Amber, I absolutely agree with all the panelists, and I think you've heard a really good message that we need to slow down. You may need to take some time off. You may need to bring a consultant in to help you with team building and team training and getting everybody on the same page. Yeah, one more thing.
And I'd like, oh, go ahead. I was going to add one thing. Even
Just
though
quickly, I wanted to add, one of the things, we have a mini retreat halfway through the year to see how we're doing as far as staying on course of what we projected, what we expected. There's one other thing that's really helped. Lately, every year, we have our team read a book. And it's not like a book report, but sometimes they'll take one chapter, sometimes they'll have the whole book. This year, they've got the whole book. So we have a discussion. I've got 150 questions that I've taken out of that book to say, how do you feel about that? You think we ought to try that idea? Think we ought to see, what do you think? That's the kind of thing I think that brings success into a practice. They feel they're part of it. They're engaged.
And I'd like to add, I know the panelist moderator's not supposed to add, but Alan said I could. I don't believe truly that there's a customer service problem in our country. I believe there's more of a leadership issue in our country. And I can assure you, after consulting more than 1,000 practices and visiting more than 40,000 practices just to visit, I can assure you that how your leadership or how your frontline workers treat the consumers, in our case, our patients, is exactly how upper and middle management treats them. So if you have an office manager, a practice administrator, make sure that they are strong leaders, just like every one of the dentists in this room, because your frontline workers always, if you have good service in a restaurant, at the bank, on the airlines, I can assure you that there's good leadership at the top. So just remember, it filters down. And what Tanya Brown said, the dentist mindset is exactly the mindset your team will have, and from your team is exactly the mindset your patients adopt. So the mindset and the leadership, to me, are two very important parts. We're going to take another question from the audience.
I have a question about, is there any thoughts about dental therapists with the panel? As many of you know, Maryland has been fighting this for about 3 years. It's an ongoing battle. We can't win it. We're not losing it, but we can't win it. Down at the state legislature, we get about 3 or 4 dentists from the Minnesota Dental School that come, say how wonderful it is. The Pew Foundation is pushing it. The whole thing is access with them. They're really saying, well, Maryland needs better access to dental care. As a lot of you know already, we have too many dentists in Maryland. Access is not a problem. What we need is adult medical assistance to help us with the adults that need help, not these dental therapists.
Analyst is, do you feel that having dental therapists as part of your dental team is a threat or an asset? Alan, I'm going to start with you, if I may, on this end.
Wow. Marshall, great question. Dental therapists, are you talking about mid-level providers as well?
Yes.
Yeah. I have a theory that you stick to what you do best, and if you're a professional, you do what your professional occupation is. I personally feel that a mid-level provider, unsupervised, on their own, would be really, in my opinion, really bad for the public in terms of delivering oral health care. And I think that's potentially where the model is going. If you have a therapist or a mid-level provider in your office that you're supervising, that's a different story. So I'm absolutely opposed to that, and I hope the Maryland legislature prevents them from practicing in our state.
Well, they are talking about having supervision over them, but we just don't want to have any part of it at all as far as Maryland goes. There's only 3 states that have these mid-level people, and that's Maine, Minnesota, and Alaska.
Maine,
Maine,
Minnesota,
and Alaska. Okay.
I don't think that they're a threat, because in those 3 states that you mentioned, I don't think we're seeing, dentists on the street holding a cup for spare change. I don't think they're taking over in any sense. But for those of us that are politically involved in the American Dental Association, Academy of General Dentistry, I salute those of you that are active. Please be active. And this is absolutely a table for discussion that we have to be sitting at. I think that the Community Dental Health Coordinator, which is the ADA's model for a mid-level provider, they're not doing irreversible procedures. I think that is a good model to help put out the fires where there is low access to care. But I don't think that, you're hard-pressed to find a dentist that is pro mid-level provider, like a DHAT. But I don't think that it's something that you should be concerned about as dentists, that it's a model that's going to take over. But for those of you that are active in the fight, please continue to have those discussions.
And
I
Alan.
agree with what Chris said, really. It's one of the reasons why I said we have to become more politically active. There's a lot of changes that are going to come up in dentistry, and we all have a say in it if we put our foot out and get on the platform and speak up. But the problem we have is most of us have apathy, as Chris said, and we can't do that anymore. We've got to speak for the profession, speak for what you're proud of. This is a very special profession we're all in. I mean, you can knock it in many ways, but I wouldn't trade it for the world. I wish I had 20 more years in this profession. I'd stay right with it. I have no fear of mid-level providers, really. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you 3 that I don't think it's going to be a huge threat that all these dental practices are going to go out of business. Again, there probably is some validity to it as long as they're supervised and it's in areas that, again, qualify and need that access to care. But as we all know, that those are limited to certain pockets, geographic pockets. And so, yeah, being awake and being active in our profession is going to keep that at bay.
Thank you. And Grace.
I don't know a whole lot about the mid-level provider, so I won't talk on that because I'm definitely not qualified. But I would say let's not get too stuck in how things have been and realize that things are changing. And think about things from a patient's perspective. I used to go to get a massage once a month because I'm a diva. And now I use my phone and I open an app and they come to my house, and there's an app that's called Zeal, or there's some other ones. And so people are coming to expect convenience and affordability. And so I wouldn't totally close our minds to these things, but I would think outside of the box about how you can combat this and how you can compete with this ever-changing market. I mean, not even just mid-level providers is a threat anymore. I mean, we're looking at people who are doing dentistry themselves. You've got the Smile Whatever Club where they're doing ortho on their own, and they're doing whitening on their own, and they're brushing their teeth with charcoal. And let's not close our eyes to what's going on, because it really is there. And I think there is some level of threat there. But think about it from the consumer's perspective, and think about, as a consumer, what would you need to know? What would you need to hear to continue to stay loyal to your dentist? Mm-hmm. And then embrace your marketing, embrace your social media, embrace what you have to stand out and to compete. So let's not close our eyes to it, because things are changing.
I would like to add to that, I'm not for it, mid-level providers, nor against it 100%. I did 5 tours in Australia. In Australia and New Zealand, they have mid-level providers, but they are under strict supervision of what they're allowed to do. They're not allowed to do dentistry. They're in the schools, and they take care of children and their extractions of deciduous teeth that are hanging by a thread or something, and they go to nursing homes, And I honestly don't believe that elderly people in nursing homes today are dying from pneumonia, even though that's on their death certificate. They are dying because of the bacteria in their mouth because no one is caring for that patient. So as far as I'm concerned, if that would be the position that these mid-level providers have, I'd love to see it.
I think the problem is that when you allow that kind of thing, which some of us might accept and some of us might not, then there's another step, and then there's another step.
Right.
And
And I
then
think
you're
that gets us
competing
back
with-
to the word fear. And I've been around long enough. I'm not disputing you, doctor. I respect you. We sat together at lunch, and I agree with you 100%. I can remember back when women were a threat to the profession of dentistry. So, what Grace said, that's the smartest young woman I know, and I think Chris is the smartest young man I know, other than Patrick and a few others in the room. But I agree that we have to be open to changes, because if there's a group of people that are not being cared for, I would love to see some. Would the dentist in that town actually go and care for the nursing homes? Would they, you know? So I think that we need to take a look at what our pluses and minuses are, but I also believe we need to not let it be a threat to the dentist as far as providers. Okay.
Linda, I'm going to add a comment. Our nursing homes now are required to have a dentist. I mean, Tom and myself, and I don't know if Pat was with me then, but a little bit. We took care of a nursing home for a number of years, and let me tell you, it's not an easy thing being a caregiver for a nursing home. You have to lift these people literally up out of wheelchairs. They come a half hour late. They don't know what time. It's hard. But we did it for about 5 years, and my understanding is now they have to have facilities to take care, dental facilities. We used to get into a big argument because we only had 2 rooms. We needed more space. We needed hygienists to be able to come out and work with us. A dentist doesn't want to spend all day doing hygiene, which is what many times we had to do. I guess my question is, does anybody know what the law is in Maryland? My understanding is that we have to have a dental office on premises.
Yes, Dan.
Nursing homes in the state of Maryland have to have a dentist on staff. Whether they use them or not is another question.
But I'm talking about the day-to-day care. You know, like the hygiene, like giving them a bed bath. Do they get their mouth cleaned? Because most of them can't take care of it. That's the biggest concern. So if they have a hygienist on staff and I get old, I'm coming to Maryland. I was born in Baltimore, so I guess I could come back, couldn't I? Okay.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Dale Kennedy. I'm from Tennessee, and that access to care thing is something we look at when we talk about those providers, because we're in the rural areas. My question to the panel is simply, my understanding is that many corporate dentists are not quite as happy as they would be, or a little aggravated. What can we do, and what does the panel think is the best bullet points for saying there's an advantage to being in private practice? Here's why we are better in private practice than you will be in corporate dentistry.
The question was, panelists, how do you feel about, there are some rumblings that corporate dentists are not staying there long, they're learning, they're paying off a few debts, and they're leaving corporate. What can we do to attract more wonderful recent grads to private practices where we really feel they should be? Grace? Or no, Alan, I'm sorry, you get to start.
I had the microphone.
Okay.
So, Dale, great question, excellent question. My response is education, education, education. I think we, as the leaders in dentistry, are failing to reach these people and educate them, to give them the knowledge that they have the ability to live the American dream. And it's the old saying that our parents have told us, we don't know what we don't know. They don't know what they don't know, because we have failed to educate them that there is an opportunity out there that they can fulfill, and they don't know any other way than potentially corporate dentistry. So I think a lot of it falls on the shoulders of the leaders in dentistry as it is today.
I agree. Thank you.
I'll be in New Jersey tomorrow at a dental student conference saying that, preaching that gospel, that and trying to ignite that entrepreneurial spirit. If you are faculty, if you have any experience with dental students or with residents, you are the person who can really help inspire them. And if they choose to go into the DSO model for a few years, that's fine. When you encounter someone at a local dental society meeting or a study club that is in that model, I want to be very clear here. Please do not admonish them. Please do not look down upon them or make any sort of, oh, you're working there, are you? Okay. Any kind of attitude like that is an immediate turnoff.
It is.
Say, hey, great, good for you. Let me know if you have any questions. Be there as a mentor, as you should be for all new dentists entering into the profession. Welcome them with open arms, and you will find that you'll be able to educate them, as Alan says, and bring them into living the American dream in their own private practice.
Excellent.
Nothing would make me happier than to get the opportunity to speak to some of those young dental students or the new dentists. But one of the things that I often think about is, you know, with corporate dentistry, you have to admit, it's a great training ground. As long as you don't have a long-term commitment that you can't get out of at some point to go in on your own, it's a great place to learn. You got to get your speed up. It takes a while. Coming out, I know about you, but I came out of dental school. I learned more about dentistry in the Navy than I learned in my school, and I needed to develop that speed, and it takes time. And I wouldn't have wanted to just jump into private practice. I don't think I was capable of doing it, frankly. So my idea with corporate dentistry, if the young person understands that they have long-range vision, long-range goals, they need to understand applied strategic planning. If they think long-term and it's going to be a short-term thing for them to do these things, then I have no problem with it at all. The only other thing I would mention, and Al, you and I have not discussed this, but one day we will. I think the smartest thing a dentist can do starting out today is to buy a couple of inexpensive practices and when the time comes. Because if you look at the numbers, you'll find that there's profit there, even though you're paying off that student debt with an average of about $290,000, I think, per student now. It still works, and you're still coming out ahead if you buy the right practices, and that's my thoughts.
Thank you. I think several people have made great comments. I agree with the things of not, looking down on students, and it goes back to us getting involved as well. I happen to be on the ADA Student Success Program, where I go into dental schools and have done that for several years. Any of you that are actively practicing are eligible to apply for that program, and any of you that would like to go into dental schools, please let me know and I'll get you in contact with them. They're always looking for speakers to do that. And truly it is about these students, because in school, sometimes they have really good professors and instructors. I remember from school, and I had to go through a little PTSD decompression after dental school. I don't know if you did, but having someone from private practice to say to them, hey, this is possible, the golden age of dentistry is not dead, and there's these resources, there's dental CPAs, there's academies like AADP, there's all these resources for you. Hey, come over to my practice and shadow me and do an over-the-shoulder week or day or month or whatever. And so I think starting in the schools earlier, and even in high schools, of us as dentists saying, hey, dentistry is a great profession, it's not a job, it's a great profession, and sharing that message, and even in our own practices with our patients, I think that's important, and letting them know, hey, there's some rewards to owning your own practice and being an entrepreneur and having that autonomy. So it's by far, I think, a great way to practice dentistry.
Thanks. So I have an idea for us. We've got an organization here of dentists. We could come up with a quiz and put it out there and publish it, a quiz that would let people evaluate if they are cut out to be an entrepreneur, and showing them the differences and evaluating the pros and cons of both career paths. So we could come up with some really great questions that people could answer to give them some guidance and to give them some idea as to what to expect from their decision. So,
Excellent idea.
So, Dale, great question. Here's a good response as well. In addition to everything we've heard, I think it takes organizations such as APA, the American Academy of Dental Practice, to get involved. And there's other organizations besides us. There's ADMC, and there's SCN, and there's all these other organizations. We have taken a leadership role this coming March, and we took it last March when we invited 20 University of Florida students to our session. And the students came and they heard Deborah Englehart Nash, they heard Charles Blair, they heard Paul Sletton, they heard a young dentist, Ryan, who just graduated school and what he went through for his first year, and I spoke as well. And this coming March, we're going to be at the Greenbrier, and we've upped it to 50 students from West Virginia University in Morgantown, and we're taking the time to coordinate that effort to expose these young dental school students to what organized dentistry looks like, not necessarily what corporate dentistry looks like. And it takes our type of organization to be proactive to bring that type of knowledge to those students. So Dale, great question, and I'm proud of this organization for taking the time and the resources to think out of the box. Just like you said, Grace, we have to think out of the box as an organization. We have to think out of the box for this corporate dentistry and what's evolving to allow us to be, quite frankly, sleep better at night and be have peace with this whole corporate movement.
Thank you so much. Let's give the panelists a wonderful round of applause.